Tutorial for making a boot. This is something that I probably talked about in class, or maybe have a part of it done in a previous tutorial. So I tried to do things as simply as possible in ZBrush, and there are very complicated ways to do things and very involved ways to do things. So a lot of my tutorials are for people who are just starting out. So the first thing I'm going to start off with is the boot shape itself. It's really kind of be a foot shape, but I just brought in a sphere, and I'm going to go into a profile shot here, and I'm going to use my move tool, so B, M, and then the move tool, and I'm going to start moving and stretching and pulling this sphere until I get a boot shape. I'm going to make sure that symmetry is on. So you see those two dots. And I'm going to always keep checking to make sure that I'm checking both the profile and the forward view and the top view. So what we could do is we could start from below and start making this foot shape. I'm doing it all with the move brush right now, keeping it kind of simple. And you probably should have some reference as well. I'm going to do this kind of quickly, but think about the bottom of the foot. Think about what the sole looks like and what the foot shape is. And you can make the shoe ambidextrous, one of them, or you could do a mirror image of it. I'm going to just work on one boot that we're going to duplicate for the other side. So that top view looks like a foot, and you can see I'm just doing very, very simple movements. I haven't done a lot. I made sure the brush was very large so that when I'm manipulating these shapes, it's kind of moving everything at once. It's moving the entire object. So now that was the bottom view. Okay, here is the left side view, or the side view. And I want to make sure I pull this heel down a little bit. Let's not worry too much about how flat the foot is right now. So let's imagine right now that this is just the leather, the upper part, the boot part of it. And it's not a great shape right now, but you can see from above it doesn't look too bad, and from below it doesn't look too bad. But from the front, you can see that it needs a bit of help. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to rotate this a little bit because I kind of got off a little bit. I'm going to rotate this down so it's nice and flat. And the reason I'm doing that, so I press the letter W to bring up the gizmo, and I'm snapped into a profile position. And now I'm going to make sure I have this gizmo zeroed by holding down the Alt key and hitting this circle right here. This is a very, very powerful tool. I know that we've been using it throughout the semester, but if you ever need to move it, you hold down the Alt key and you can move it all around. If you're using a Mac, it's the Option key. But depending on where it is, it can pivot from different directions, from different angles. But for right now, let's just use the tool the way we need to. Like right now, I think I'm going to thin that boot out a little bit. And now let's go back to sculpting it. So I'm going to go to Q, and now I'm sculpting. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my wireframe so we can see what this looks like. You can see it's kind of distorted. So what I'm going to do is, usually I do a Dynamesh, but I just watched a tutorials where they were using Z Remesher. And I'm going to go to Geometry, and I'm going to go to Z Remesher, and I'm going to just hit it and see what happens. It works on it for a little bit, so what that's doing is it kind of gets rid of the stretched out areas. Now I'm going to turn the wireframe off. So you can see with the wireframe on, even though you get some distortion here, it's not that bad. It's much cleaner than it was. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten the bottom of the foot out just to get started a little bit. We're going to go back to it a couple of times and probably cut it again. So I'm going to use my trim curve button. this pop-up will happen and you want to hit skip. So now whenever you hold on Control and Shift, you're going to get this, it's going to turn white. It goes red, it's red when you're usually sculpting. If you press the Shift, it goes to a smoothing color, so it's blue. But if I hold the two of them down, it goes white. Now as soon as I touch the screen, I can let go of those buttons and I can drag it across. And what we have is we have that cutting tool. That's the dark area behind the dotted line. And if I let go, it's going to cut it off. So I'm getting a nice flat piece right there for the bottom of this foot. We're doing a boot. We're not doing a foot, so we don't have to worry about toes or anything like that. And I may have flattened this out a little bit early, but I wanted to show you what happens. And I might be repeating myself, but if this is the first time you're watching and you're new to ZBrush, you put on the wireframe and you can see that because I made that cut with the trim curve, it turned it into two separate poly groups. So I'm going to do Control W, which makes it all one poly group. And I'm going to now run Z Remesher one more time. And it'll go pretty fast, but you can see it kind of cleaned up that cut. Okay, now I am going to do a little bit of sculpting. So you could use the standard brush. You could use the clay buildup. You could use clay blobs, but I like using the standard brush when I'm doing something kind of smooth. I don't need to be too organic about it. So I'm going to start by getting rid of some of these shapes and adding some here and there. So I want to add that up. I want to get rid of some of these areas here. And I'm going to go to my move brush and I'm going to move this up a little bit. We're going to do kind of a short boot. We're not going to do like a knee length boot. But what I can also do is I can hold down the Control key and I can create a mask. So I'm going to make that mask a little bit deeper. I'm going to hold on the Control key and click off of it, off of the model, and that reverses it. I'm going to hit the W key, which brings my gizmo back up, and then I'm going to just stretch that out a little bit. So we're going to make kind of a medium-sized boot. Now I'm going to go back to my draw mode. I'm going to clear the mask by holding down Control and then dragging off the model and doing that. So we got a little bit of ugliness there. I think at this point I'm probably going to switch to Dynamesh. So whenever you Dynamesh, I have it up here, but you could find Dynamesh here in the geometry pull down, and it's right there. And you'll see that it always kind of starts off in the blur mode. We want to get rid of that blur. Right now we're at 128, which isn't too bad. You don't want to go too high because then it's going to take you forever to smooth things out, and it's just too big of a model, and it's unnecessary. So I just ran Z Remesher. Now it's kind of created a very fine group of a lot of resolution, I should say, a fine group of polys to work with. And now I can go in there and I can smooth some things out. I'm going to cut the top of this boot off the same way I did before. But you can see I had to start from this other direction, from the other side, because if I were to start from this side, I'd be cutting away the rest of this boot underneath. But what I want to do is cut it from the other side. So I'm going to make a bit of a curve. So I'm going to hold down the Shift and Control to start my cut. I'm going to bring it into the model and I'm going to tap the Option key, or in your case the Alt key, once to make a nice soft curve. If you want to do sharp curves, then you can double tap it. So if I wanted to start that cut and I double tap the Alt or the Option key, it's going to make a little bit more of a cut that's a little bit more angled. And right now you can see that it's not perfect, but we'll worry about that later on because we've got a little ways to go. Okay, now that I've Dynameshed it, I can use my standard brush to start to change the shape of some of this. Okay, because this isn't a great shape. I'm not really sure if I like it very much. I'm going to undo that. I think I'm going to switch to the clay buildup brush. I like that way that works a little bit better. It kind of gives me a better feel for a buildup. I think it's because I work as a traditional sculptor out in the real world, that sometimes I like to see the buildup of material that's a little rougher, and then I can go back and fix that. So when you're working on this foot, you want to make sure that it looks like it's the right length for your character. You don't want it too long. We're not making clown shoes here. And we want to kind of make it look a little on the elegant side. So I will sometimes hold down the Option key to cut away some material when I'm using a tool, or a brush, I should say. So that's starting to look a little bit, I'm starting to feel better about that. Okay, I'm just going to taper it a little bit, bring it in for the ankle. We can add all kinds of buckles and textures and all that later on. Okay, so I'm going to run ZRemesh again. So you can see, Dynamesh again. So you can see my Dynamesh is right here. You can see it also is here. While it's on, if you hold down the Control key and click and drag, you'll see it turns yellow. Click and drag, it runs Dynamesh again. And it didn't have to do too much, so it didn't take very long. And now I'm going to go in and smooth things out. I just saw a tutorial about somebody making a very, very wonderful, hyper-realistic boot. And some of the techniques were great. I really like them. I just think it's a little bit more advanced than we need to be right now for where we are, since this is a ZBrush beginning class, let's say, so the first time you're learning to use ZBrush. But I will post it in the comments if you want to follow that and watch somebody who has a lot more experience than I do using ZBrush. And the more experience you have with anything, you learn tricks of the trade. You learn all kinds of things that that you do all along the way. I have a lot of tricks that I know just from my experience, but I'm always willing to learn new ones. And that's what I like about teaching, is because I can learn as I go and just increase my abilities, and everybody benefits from it. Okay, so now we have a boot top. We'll call this the upper. Now, what I think I'd like to do next is create the sole. So we're going to start, here's the foot. Let's call this the boot. I'm going to rename this level, or this layer, boot. And then I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to go down here and duplicate it. And then I'm going to make this, I'm going to name this the sole. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to this sole layer, and I'm going to once again use our trusty old trim curve button, our brush, and I'm going to cut a slice of the boot out. So we know that the bottom of the boot is relatively flat, but in order to make the sole, I'm going to cut this part of the sole away, or the foot away. So I held down those two keys and I dragged it along, and if I hold the Shift key, it will create a straight line. And you see, if I let go of the Shift, it goes wherever it wants. But if you hold the Shift down, it will cut on a straight line. Right now I kind of let go too quick. You see, oh, I'm sorry. What it's doing right now is it's creating different polygroups, which I don't want. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut it again. Okay, so now I've cut the piece. I didn't realize that if you hold down the Shift key, it's basically changing the polygroups. And I'm going to slice it one more time in the other direction. And now I have a cross section of our boot, and you can see it kind of floating there. Now I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it down a little bit, and you can see it becomes the heel or the sole of the boot. But for us, we probably want to make the foot not flat, but have a heel and a little bit of a detail that goes down like this. So we don't want a flat-footed boot. We're going to want something with a short heel, and we're going to have it swoop down a little bit and straighten out. So I'm going to try something. I'm going to mask off this part of the boot, and I'm going to soften that. Let me just make this on its own layer. I'm going to soften that by holding down the Control key. Sorry, and I'm clicking on it, on the part, and you can see it went from relatively flat and kind of sharp. And by holding down the control key and clicking on this side of it, you can see it softens the mask. All right. And what that'll do for us is make, whenever we move, just kind of a soft move rather than a harsh move. I'm just going to bend this down a little bit. I'm not sure if I like that. I think I'm going to undo that and clear that mask. And I think I'm going to use my move tool, or my snake hook. I'm going to make this very large, and I'm going to move the heel down a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. Okay, so I have this in profile. I'm going to just make it a little bit dipped down, and we're going to make the heel in a minute. But now let's go back to our boot. So now our boot doesn't match, so I'll go into the boot layer, and then I'm going to change the way the boot is so it follows that contour a little bit. Make sure that the heel sticks out, gets tucked in. I'll make this, I'll make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to bring it down. Now you can start to see that's looking pretty nice, actually. I'm pretty happy with that. But I'm going to click on the heel. I'm going to hit my move button or hit the W key, and I'm just going to broaden it a little bit. Okay, and by using the gizmo, I can spread it out that way a little bit, spread it out that way. Now there's a nice overhang and offset. Now you can see everything looks really clean. For me, if I have the uppers or the leather part on one layer, and I have the heel and the sole on separate layers, and they have the ability to make more changes to them. Okay, again, I'm not spending a ton of time on this. Okay, I'm looking for shortcuts. I'm looking ways to save time when you're making something. Okay, now we're going to go for the heel. And now instead of sculpting a heel in an organic way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to append. I'm going to grab a cylinder. There's the cylinder right there. And I'm going to, I think I'm going to divide it a couple of times just to give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more resolution. I'm going to go to geometry. I'm going to delete those layers. Now I'm going to hit the W and use my gizmo. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to use this little slider here to shorten it. And I'm going to look at it from the top. I'm going to use this slider to make it a little bit fatter in the center. I'm going to kind of back it up to where the heel is going to be. Now I don't need it to be that tall. So in this profile, I'm going to shorten it and then bring it down to the level I need to bring it down to match the boot. I have perspective off, and sometimes when you're working with something that you want to see the bottom, it really helps to have it that way. Okay, so we don't want a round heel, so while I'm going to go back to the draw button, and I'm going to once again use my trusty trim curve, and I'm going to cut half of this away. Okay, so now I'm getting closer to what I want. You can see that short heel, but it still doesn't fit. So I want to use my gizmo once again. And when I show you how to do all this stuff, this is only one tiny way to do things. It's maybe not the best way, and there are people who do it 5 or 6 different ways. And but if you're in a hurry and if you've never made a heel before or a shoe before, this is a quick way to do it. Okay, so that's looking okay. I'm not sure if I like it that much, but we'll see. I'm going to go back to the sole. So just as a reminder, you can see we have all these different layers. So instead of looking through your layers, what you can do, because you want to pop to a different layer, instead of having to go through the list, remember you can hold down the Alt key or Option key and click on it, and it'll jump right to that layer. I'm going to click to the heel layer. I'm going to name it heel so that I can always find it if I need to. And I want to work on the sole. So I think I'm going to go back to that move tool and straighten this out a little bit. Okay. I think I like this. I'm going to go to the heel. And I'm going to move it some more. Whenever you can move something in a linear fashion, it really helps, because if you're moving things without using these lines right here, if you move it off like this, you never know where it is. But if you're going to move something in either direction, always use these arrows here. These edge arrows on your gizmo will move it anywhere. These main arrows will move it X and Y or Z, and then nice straight line. And then these boxes, as you know, will squash and stretch all that. And then, of course, the yellow will make it grow and shrink. Okay, now what I could do is I could try to do a taper on this heel. Let me see if that'll work. I'm going to go to my deformation layer, and I'm going to go to taper. Let's see if I can taper it in the right direction. Maybe that's not too bad. Where's taper? Right there. I think I'm going to go back to where I was, and you can see here it says taper, and it says I'm going to taper on the X and the Y axis. I'm going to see what it looks like if I just taper it on one axis. I don't like that. I'm going to go taper to that axis, the Y axis. I'll turn that off. And I'm going to go like that. So you kind of see what's going on. It was very, very slight, but you can start to see it's looking pretty cool. So I'm going to go back to my gizmo. I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit. And then you can see, so you can see on this deformation, sometimes you use it for making mirrors, but you can do all kinds of things. You can inflate it, you can taper it, and then all these little buttons on the side tell you what axis that to make this action happen. So you can get a lot of different things going on. I just noticed that I want a little bit more heel on this boot, so I'm going to move this out a little bit and tuck that in a little bit like that. That's starting to look better, I think. Okay. Yeah, that came together very quickly. And you could add a tread to the bottom of this. There's so many things that you can do in ZBrush. I'm going to flatten the bottom of this heel out just a tiny bit. I mean the sole. Just to match that. Okay, I put a little bit of a flat. That looks a little strange, but it'll look better once it's standing on the ground. Okay, so very, very clean, very nice. Now what I could do, if I want to, is I can go to this layer here, and I could start sculpting on it if I want to give it a texture so it looks like leather, or if I want to put a couple of wrinkles in. I might turn off the x-axes, you know, the symmetry, and then I might start to put in just a little bit of a few wrinkles and bumps, just so you can see just kind of a hint of a material, so it doesn't look like it's made out of cement or carved out of wood or something like that. Now I might go to my dam standard. Where is that? Do I have that here? Yes. And then I sometimes use my dam standard just to do a couple of quick jabs like that, just to make it look like this shoe's been around the block a couple of times, just to give it some texture and some folds. And I'm not going to do a lot to this. All right, I'm going to just kind of keep it simple. Now, if I wanted to do another layer, like this is not a slip-on boot, I can do another layer to make the part where I do the stitches. So I'm going to put on the x-axis again. I'm going to hold down the control key and create where the boot laces up. Okay. I'm going to keep it pretty rough right now, but I think I'll just sharpen that mask. So I'm going to go to masking. I'm going to sharpen that mask a couple of times. And then I'm going to go to subtools, and I'm going to extract it, and I'm going to accept it. And now you can see that it looks a little bit on the rough side, and what I've done by extracting it is I put something on its own layer, and we'll call this laces just so I can keep track of it. All right, now you see as soon as you do an extraction, it's going to create a mask for you. And you have to remember that this version or this layer has a mask on it, so you always want to clear that because sometimes it gets you confused. Okay, so we're going to click to this layer, we're going to clear that mask. Now let's sharpen this up a bit. I'm going to go to Solo. I'm going to use once again my trim curve button, and I'm going to start the trim curve, and I'm going to tap Alt or Option and start doing a bit of a cut like that. to make a nice straight line. I'm going to cut it in the other direction. Now what this is probably going to do is delete that mirror image, but we don't care about that right now. Let's make that kind of a little bit different. I'm going to make it a little bit more curved. Okay, now I'm going to turn solo off so I can see what that looks like. Okay, so if I like that, I'm going to make sure that it's one poly group. Right now, it's multiple poly groups for being cut. So I'm going to do Control W, and then I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to mirror it. Going to deformation, mirror it. You've done this a million times. And now I'm going to turn solo off. And you can see that there's two of them and they're on two different layers. So now I'm going to combine the two layers. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to click on the one above. I'm going to go to merge, merge down. And now they're on the same layer. And I'm going to make sure that they're the same poly group. This might not make a lot of sense right now, but what I could do is I could do some stitch work here and I could start to work on some laces, but you can add all kinds of detail. If you wanted to add detail on the tip of this toe perhaps, so I wanted something like that, I could once again use the extract button and I can accept it, and now that looks a little bit on the thick side, so I'm going to clear that. I'm going to go solo, and I'm going to cut this into pieces. So I'm going to keep it at this forward angle like this in the profile. I'm going to cut the front of it off, and I'm going to cut the bottom of it off because we don't need it. Okay, now I think it's just a little thick, so what I can do is I can go to my gizmo button, pressing W. I can use my Option or Alt key to bring it into play with the shape I want to shrink a little bit, and I'll put it at an angle where I can just make it ever so slightly thinner. Okay. And I think I'm going to stretch it out a little bit too. I'll stretch it out this way, tuck it in just a little bit. Okay, now you can start to see that was, I don't know, how long has this video been going on? Maybe 20 minutes at the most? So very quickly you can start to build up your character or build up your layers for your shoe to make this happen. I'm going to go to the light box by pressing the comma. I'm going to go to brushes. Where are they? Brushes. There they are. And then there we could go with laces or stitching. So I can go with the stitch button here, and I can create some stitch lines, say on this piece here. So if I wanted to, oh, I'm going to have to divide that a couple of times. And I'm going to make this brush nice and small. I can go in there and put some stitches on it. No, it's still too big. I'm going to make that really small. I don't like that. I'm going to try this one. If I wanted to, I could add those. It's all right. I'm not sure if I like that. You can find all kinds of alphas and other things to do stitches. Maybe I want to see it in reverse, so I'll hold down the Option key. I think I like that a little bit better. All right. So now we're starting to look more like a boot with a little bit of detail. I'm going to go to this main one here, and maybe I'll just cut in some stitches. Now you can see when I first did that, it doesn't look very good because we don't have a lot of resolution. So I'm going to divide that a couple of times, and I'm going to try it again. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I wanted this. Now you can start to see it looks a little bit better because I've got the resolution to cut those things in there. If I go to here, I could create eyes. I could create eyelets and then do laces. But you can see within a very quick amount of time, you can create a very reasonable looking boot. I would spend a lot more time on this. I'm doing it quickly for this tutorial, but you can see it comes together pretty quick. So I hope this helps, and experiment, experiment, experiment. Keep working on things, and just have fun with it, because the more things you try, the more you're going to learn. And it's hard to stop because it's such a great program, and you can do so much with it. So I hope you enjoyed what you see. There you go. Okay, thanks.